In popularity corresponds with a $2.2 billion TV rights deal the WNBA signed for 2026 that covers the next 11 years, which ESPN reports will increase the league's annual revenue by about $200 million a season. Yet, WNBA players say they're not being paid what they're owed. Right now, they get less than 10% of the league's total revenue, a strikingly slim margin when compared to other pro sports leagues in which athletes typically split revenues about 50-50.
Let's be honest for a second. Okay, time to break this down. We've got 5 separate sections to cover, so that means 5 distinct paragraphs. No combining, no cutting corners. Just straight up engaging narration gold, delivered exactly the way you asked for.
In the past 6 months, all we have been hearing about is how the WNBA is having a record-breaking event after another, and yet not paying its players a fair salary. The simple answer is the league is just not making enough money. And it's basically just been trying to stay afloat all these years. Well, until the $2.2 billion media rights deal it signed with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC just a couple of months ago. And of course, the announcement of the 3 new teams that will be added to the league in the next few years. That will all flush the WNBA with much needed cash. This, of course, coincides with the collective bargaining agreement that will be negotiated after the 2025 season. CNBC dug into the nuances of the league's business model to really see how likely it is that the salaries will match up to the influx of the cash in the next few years.
The WNBA really wants us to believe they've pulled off the biggest trick in sports history. According to them, ratings are skyrocketing, sponsors can't wait to throw money their way, and suddenly the entire world is obsessed with women's basketball. But here's the kicker. Behind the flashy headlines, they've been caught playing a sneaky game with the real numbers, and the whole illusion came crashing down the moment Caitlin Clark went down with her injury. So let's be real. Who's actually buying into this story?
$1 billion media rights deal out there.
There's rumor of it?
Reporting about the next media rights deal.
Then if I'm not great with numbers, low ball.
Why do you say that?
That's a low ball. You're saying how much?
2.2 billion over 11
Not
years.
enough. Not even close. Now, I'm not trying to inflate it a whole lot, but a 2's nice, and 8 would be better. That's what I'm talking about, because they know. They know. And we certainly have come a long way.
Here's the truth. If there's one thing the WNBA has perfected, it's making things look far better than they actually are. Lately, they've been flaunting their so-called success story, parading rating jumps, hyping attendance numbers, and acting like their financial future is untouchable. But once you start peeling back the layers, the story doesn't quite add up. And then Caitlin Clark's injury came along, serving as the ultimate reality check, a clear moment showing exactly what's really happening behind the scenes.
The NBA players want as much money as the NBA players. So the NBA actually generates extreme amounts of revenue. Somebody wrote a joke about it. The WNBA wanted what their just pay was, and so they owe $400 million because that's really how it balances out. It's like a losing it's never been profitable.
The league can't stop boasting about that flashy $2.2 billion TV rights deal scheduled for 2026. They want everyone to believe that ESPN, CBS, ABC, and all the other networks just couldn't resist pouring billions into what they claim is the hottest league in the country. But here's the harsh reality. The WNBA didn't actually earn that deal on its own. Nope. It was the NBA, and Adam Silver in particular, who strong-armed the networks into it. He knew nobody was going to pay top dollar for a league that can't sell itself, so the WNBA was bundled in. Want NBA games? Great, but you also get WNBA games whether you want them or not. That, my friends, is not market triumph. It's a forced package deal, like being told you can't get Wi-Fi unless you also buy a landline you'll never use. The league might spin it as evidence of massive growth, but what it really exposes is total dependency. And let me be clear, if the NBA ever decided to walk away, the WNBA would disappear faster than a politician's promise after Election Day. That $200 million per season figure they love tossing around, it's not revenue generated by genuine demand, it's a straight up handout. Yet WNBA players act like it's their golden ticket, suddenly expecting salaries to double, triple, or somehow magically match NBA paychecks. And here's the kicker, WNBA players currently earn less than 10% of league revenue compared to roughly a 50-50 split in the NBA. Sounds unfair at first glance, right? But the part they conveniently skip is that the WNBA doesn't make a profit, ever. They operate at a loss every single year, fully subsidized by the NBA. Yet these players want to claim a 50-50 cut of numbers that don't even exist. They're literally asking for half of a negative balance. Good luck cashing that check. And of course, this crisis suddenly became a national priority. Politicians leapt in, like the Democratic Women's Caucus, sending letters demanding a fair CBA, as if WNBA players were coal miners being underpaid while risking their lives underground. Nope, they're athletes in a league that wouldn't survive a single month without NBA support, yet Congress treats them like victims of oppression. It's absolutely insane. Now let's finally get to ratings, because this is where the story gets really revealing. After Caitlin Clark went down, the WNBA suddenly had a chance to prove all those claims they'd been shouting for months. We're bigger than any one player, they insisted. Clark isn't carrying the league. There are plenty of stars, fans will tune in no matter what. So what actually happened? According to the numbers they released, the WNBA averaged 969,000 viewers across ABC, ESPN, CBS, and ION. They celebrated like they'd conquered the sports world, claiming it was the most watched season since 1998. Impressive. Until you dig a little deeper. When Clark plays, ratings soar. When she doesn't, they crash. For example, her Indiana team drew 1.3 million viewers on ION for a single game, while the other 7 games without her averaged just 924,000. That's a clear drop, and for the rest of the league without her, only 505,000 viewers, barely half. On CBS, Indiana games with Clark hit 1.8 million viewers, while the rest of the WNBA barely managed 83,000. ABC, Clark consistently pulled in 2 million, with other teams scraping just over 1 million. ESPN numbers, Clark averaged 1.44 million, while the rest of the league barely broke 6 figures. The pattern is crystal clear. Growth isn't league-wide. It's all tied to one player. And here's where it gets even shadier. Not every rating was reported. 4 games on ESPN and ABC, both Disney properties, mysteriously disappeared. No numbers released. Did someone misplace them, accidentally delete them? Or more likely, did those games flop so badly that reporting the truth would blow the WNBA's hype machine wide open? This isn't new either. Remember when Pat McAfee's show tanked and ESPN conveniently stopped sharing his ratings? Same playbook here. While the WNBA struts around talking about record growth, the truth is staring everyone in the face. Successful games almost always involve Caitlin Clark. The flops? Ignored, hidden, or quietly scrubbed from public records. And yet the league insists this proves their star power is spread evenly across all teams. Balanced? That's like saying the Beatles were just another band. Attendance tells a similar story. The league brags that 7 teams averaged over 10,000 fans per game this season. Sounds great until you look closer. The Minnesota Lynx, one of the WNBA's supposed flagship franchises, averaged just under 10,000 in an arena that seats double that. Even the best markets are filling only half their seats. In any other industry, that's called underperformance. But in WNBA land, mediocrity is marketed as victory. This is exactly why Caitlin Clark's injury was catastrophic for the league. She isn't just a player, she's the WNBA's life support. Without her, ratings drop, attendance shrinks, and the illusion of success cracks. But instead of owning that truth, the league launched another PR spin. Ratings are still up without Clark. When you strip away all the hype, what the WNBA is calling growth is basically flatlined interest compared to the massive spike Caitlin Clark alone has generated. And the players, they're acting like this growth is their golden ticket, demanding bigger contracts, private jets, and revenue shares that simply don't exist. Meanwhile, the on-court product hasn't improved one bit. The basketball is sloppy, the pace is slow, and half the league's headlines come from off-court drama, not actual competition. Fans aren't tuning in for fundamentals. They're tuning in for Caitlin Clark, for controversy, and for the circus-like atmosphere the league itself encourages. But pause for a second and ask yourself, if Caitlin Clark hadn't entered the WNBA, what would the league even look like right now? Would there be a TV deal? Would anyone care about attendance? Would politicians be writing letters about revenue sharing? Or would the league still be quietly hemorrhaging money, begging the NBA to keep it afloat? This is why the WNBA's ratings manipulation is so infuriating. They're not just inflating numbers, they're rewriting the narrative of their own survival. They want casual fans to believe women's basketball is finally breaking through, that momentum is organic, and that support is widespread. In reality, it's fragile, artificial, and entirely propped up by one player's unstoppable popularity. Without her, the whole house of cards collapses. Now, nobody is saying Caitlin Clark's injury means the league is doomed tomorrow, but it absolutely exposes the truth they've been hiding. The WNBA is still the same dependent, subsidized, validation-hungry league it's always been, and as long as they keep hiding ratings, exaggerating growth, and demanding money they haven't earned, the gap between their fantasy and reality will only widen. Their record ratings are paraded like trophies, but key context is always missing. Sure, this was the most watched season since 1998, but back then, TV audiences were exponentially bigger because there wasn't Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, and hundreds of other distractions competing for attention. So bragging about 1998, that's not exactly impressive. It's like flexing a high score in a video game you haven't touched in 25 years. Sure, neat, but ultimately meaningless. And that magical number they keep touting, 969,000 average viewers? At first glance, it looks decent, but put it in perspective, that's basically one episode of a mid-tier cable reality show. We're talking reruns of Shark Tank on CNBC. The WNBA isn't competing with the NBA, NFL, or MLB. It's battling shows like 90 Day Fiancé and barely winning. If your league's biggest achievement is edging out a reality TV rerun, maybe ease up on the "we're exploding" hype. Now, let's talk about those missing ESPN and ABC ratings. This is where things get really shady. Out of all their broadcast partners, only Disney's networks conveniently forgot to release ratings for 4 games. What a coincidence, right? If those games had crushed it, do you honestly think ESPN would have buried the numbers? Of course not. They would have shouted it from the rooftops. That alone tells you everything you need to know. Those games flopped, and instead of owning it, the league and their media partners just swept it under the rug. This is what frustrates regular fans. Transparency matters. If the WNBA had simply said, some games draw huge numbers thanks to certain stars, others don't, we're working on it, people might actually respect that. But instead, they hide the facts, spin every stat, and overhype everything. That's why so many roll their eyes when the league brags about progress. It doesn't feel earned. It feels manufactured. And then there's Caitlin Clark, who exposes the entire charade. With her on the court, numbers spike to respectable levels. Without her, they plummet back down to niche curiosity. She is the league's main attraction, whether they admit it or not. Yet, instead of embracing it, the WNBA downplays her importance. They push other names, Bonner, Stewart, Wilson, Thomas, as if casual fans care. Newsflash, they don't. The numbers prove it. Without Caitlin Clark, the hype disappears entirely. Still, the league keeps pretending fans are tuning in for the full product. They're not, they're tuning in for her, period. And that brings us to the bigger issues. Sustainability. Sure, you can spin one season into a success story, but what happens 5 years from now? What happens when Caitlin Clark isn't the fresh face anymore? What if she gets injured again, or her appeal starts to fade? Who will carry the league then? The harsh reality is, nobody. The WNBA hasn't built a foundation, it's just riding a wave, and waves crash. Cracks are already visible. Attendance outside of Indiana is all over the place. Teams brag about sellouts, but a full arena of 10,000 isn't exactly impressive, especially when many of those seats are filled with free or heavily discounted tickets. And the TV side, that's even more fragile. One superstar cannot sustain ratings forever. If networks lose interest, the billions vanish, and the WNBA is back to begging the NBA for life support. And speaking of money, the player demands are absolutely hilarious. WNBA players see that $2.2 billion TV deal and immediately assume it means bigger paychecks. They want a bigger cut, more perks, and salaries that mirror the NBA. But here's the catch. They don't seem to understand that none of that money comes from actual demand for their product. It's forced, it's bundled, it's charity. Think about it. If the WNBA really earned $200 million a season, why didn't networks offer it voluntarily? Why did it take Adam Silver Silver twisting arms to make the deal happen. The truth is, the demand isn't there. Fans aren't clamoring for more games, and ESPN isn't racing to schedule primetime WNBA doubleheaders. The numbers simply don't support it, yet players act like they've earned a giant payday. It's entitlement at its finest. They see NBA players splitting revenue 50-50 and think they deserve the same, but the NBA actually generates billions in profit. The WNBA doesn't. Comparing the two is like demanding a Starbucks paycheck for running a lemonade stand. And if you point that out, suddenly you're the villain. You're anti-women or against equality. Number, it's basic math. If the money isn't there, you can't spend it. End of story. Now let's circle back to Caitlin Clark's injury. This was the league's moment to prove it wasn't a one-player show, and they failed. Ratings dropped, excitement fizzled, and media coverage slowed to a crawl. The only stories people cared about were off-court drama, political spin, or league PR about growth. Basketball itself, almost irrelevant. That should absolutely send chills down the league's spine. Sports thrive when the product itself is strong enough to carry the spotlight. The NFL doesn't rely on a single player. Neither do the NBA, MLB, or NHL. Stars matter, sure, but the league stands on its own. The WNBA. Take Caitlin Clark out of the picture, and it collapses. That's not a healthy league. It's a circus tent propped up by one central pole. Remove that pole, and the whole thing comes crashing down. Ultimately, the league isn't panicking just because Clark is injured. They're panicking because her absence exposed everything they've been hiding. The ratings spin, the attendance fluff, the illusion of growth. It all fell apart the moment their golden goose was sidelined. And the truly terrifying part for them, they know it deep down.